I built the system set against mine. You all.
Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and other left-wing extremists, they are marching on this Labor Day. That was in Pittsburgh. Nothing says social justice like disturbing perfect strangers while they're trying to, enjoy a meal, or drinking a beer they didn't pay for, and breaking glasses of restaurants struggling to get by in the era of the China virus. For more on this and the violence we're seeing in liberal cities across the country, we're joined by Ian Haworth, columnist of the Daily Wire, also joined by David Williams, president of the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Ian, we're going to start with you. In that clip we just played, BLM thinks it's cool to accost a white couple just trying to eat a meal in peace there and berate them for their race. This is the definition, by the way, of racism. But this in-your-face aggression has been encouraged by politicians in the Democrat Socialist Party like Maxine Waters and others. Your thoughts?
I mean, yeah, this is just the result of years of subtle linguistic encouragement of violence that's now come to a head. The Democrats have fueled this fire, and unfortunately now, especially with an election coming up, we're seeing the results. I mean, the fact that the Democrats have recently pivoted on the fact that violence is bad is really only the result of polls, with Don Lemon famously saying that it's showing up in the polls, so the Democrats now need to criticize violence. The reality is that they were hoping to ride this violence into power effectively, and it's just a sign of utter moral depravity that they have allowed violence to explode in Democrat cities, by the way.
Yeah, and also a clue, they have no idea what the American people want, nor do they care. David, we've seen 100 consecutive nights of violence in Portland. Every morning, those businesses have to clean up. The government, they have their government buildings destroyed. The government has to pay workers to clean it up or rebuild. The cost to the taxpayers, nobody in the biased press is even talking about this, but all these left-wingers are allowing the little darlings to rampage and pass the tax bill onto those who go out there and, however many are lucky working still, have their tax money go to repair everything.
Yeah, the damage has been done. And listen, the Democrats may recognize that this is bad for the polls, but guess what? The damage has been done literally and figuratively, and we're talking about hundreds of millions, maybe billions of dollars. And these are people that have lost their small business, and they're not going to be able to rebuild. And the city is probably going to look to taxpayers to pay for to repair all of this damage. I mean, we're looking at Minneapolis. That's $500 million in the hole already from what's happened this year. And we know what's going to happen next. Tax increases. I mean, this is the logical next step for Democrats, is to raise taxes to pay for this. And here's the irony, and here's the weird part of this, is that police are getting a lot more money because there's a lot more overtime. So, BLM is saying that we want to defund the police, but your activities are actually increasing the pay to police for overtime. So it's kind of a weird dynamic that's going on here. And it's an expensive dynamic for taxpayers at this point.
Yeah, and the sickos up in Minneapolis, what they want to do is, or what they're doing is, all those businesses they failed to protect by defunding the police and allowing them to be burned down, they're charging them taxes. They're making them pay their taxes before they can even clean up. And Ian, I got to tell you, the Democrats seeing the poll numbers shift on all of this, you just made allusion to that. Who is going to be stupid enough to sit there and say, oh, now Democrats care, when they haven't cared for the last 3 or 4 months? I mean, isn't this already baked into the election?
I would hope so, but the problem is that this fits in a pattern with the Democrats where they tend to pander to certain ideas, usually in alignment with the election. You see the same thing on racial issues, the way they let a lot of inner cities, for example, which is predominantly a minority in terms of the population, they let them implode in terms of crime and violence. And then every 4 years, they come up and present their policies as the unique solution. And so I'm concerned that so many people are so under the boot of Trump derangement syndrome that they're going to see this as, oh, this is Trump's America. They're going to swallow the brand new Democrat talking point, which is, this isn't Biden's America, this is Trump's America. And you need more Democrats to solve it, despite the fact that these outbursts of violence are happening in cities with Democratic mayors, Democratic police chiefs, Democratic congressmen, and often Democratic senators. So often the solution to violence is Democrats and the cause of violence is Republicans. A lot of people fundamentally believe that. And so I'm a little cynical as to whether or not people will open their eyes and see that this is the Democrats stoking the fire and the solution is not more Democratic Party rule.
Well, no kidding. And you know what? I've looked at Democrats, independents, and Republicans saying they're tired of all of the violence. And a lot of people are asking, what can I do? If my Minneapolis City Council decides they want to sit on their duffs, charge our taxpayer dollars to pay for their private security and defund our protection, what can we do? And David, let me ask you, if you've even looked into this, and maybe you haven't, but I've had a lot of people call me on the talk show, basically saying, hey, Chris, Amazon and the NFL and the NBA and Major League Baseball, they've given millions and millions and millions of dollars to Black Lives Matter and Antifa. Can't the American people sue the pants off of those organizations to recoup some of their money for their communities?
Well, probably not. But here's the problem is that, it pales in comparison what Amazon and what the NFL is giving to really clean up these cities and fix these cities. And you have the insurance problem. Now premiums are going to go up, and that's going to hurt the people that have businesses. Their insurance premiums are going to go up. We want to encourage people to get back to work. But when you see this, you're not. And, this isn't a black and white issue. This is a middle class issue. You saw that very frustrated lady trying to drive through traffic. And these are people in the middle class. They just want to do better for themselves. But when you economically destroy a city, how do you do that? How do you lift people up either from poverty or from the middle class into the upper middle class? So that's what's going on here. And quite honestly, that's why the polls moved. Is that, listen, there's I'm not a black person, I'm not a white person. I'm a middle class person trying to get by and trying to do better for my family and achieve the American dream. So I think that's where a lot of the frustration is. And again, this is going to come at a price tag. People don't understand this. We're talking about billions of dollars to rebuild. And, the federal government can only do so much at this point to, provide money. So there's going to have to be a breaking point for people when it comes to rebuilding these cities. And for taxpayers, there'll be a breaking point.
Yeah, many left-wing cities aren't going to have a choice as moving vans are lined up around the block because people are leaving. There will be no tax base to rebuild these cities, even if Democrats decide they want to enforce the law for a change. Ian and David, gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate the time. Coming up, polling shows a dead heat in Pennsylvania between President Trump and Beijing Biden. We'll get to that next on Newsmax TV.